Christina here from Savvy Business Radio, inviting you to join us for a new interview series called From Burnout to Brilliant, Invaluable Strategies to Become More Vibrant, Purpose-Driven, and Wildly Successful. Hosted by my friend and colleague, certified coach and medical doctor Diane Ansari Wynn. I'll be one of more than 20 featured amazing guests in this interview series, which run from October 7th through October 27th. Join us at no cost and sign up today at FromBurnoutToBrilliant.com. Hello everyone and welcome to Savvy Business Radio. This is your host, Christina Nichman. Each week on Savvy, we host successful individuals and business owners, inviting them to share their dreams, stories, wisdom, and gifts with the world. Our first guest today is Gretchen Pisano, CEO and co-founder of p.Link Coaching Center. She discusses how you can create meaningful work with your gifts, talents, and skills, also known as job crafting. Find out more about Gretchen and her business atplinkcoachingcenter.com. Our second guest is Dana A. Oliver. He is the author of Mandra Design and discusses the importance of innovation and leadership to the growth of your business. Find out more about Dana and his business at mandraleadership.com. Hi, Gretchen. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you. We're going to talk about a subject that doesn't get touched on a lot on our show because most people who listen in, who have become guests in the past, are service-based entrepreneurs. But your topic is right on par with you running a business, or if you're an employee or you're doing both. And that is really getting the right work-life for you and making it something that's balanced and where you're having the best time at either being an employee or a business owner. So before we go there, share a little bit about your background, how you became the founder and co-founder of p.Link Coaching Center and doing what you do to help people with setting up the perfect career.
Sure, I would be happy to. So this path is probably about a 20-year professional path, and I actually started out right out of undergraduate. I went to work for a company. I was their assistant marketing director, and about a year into it, I just found myself not really digging it, like not really wanting to get up and go to work in the morning. And I just, not the way I want to do this. And so I resigned and they hired me back as a consultant. And that began my consulting career, which to this day I am still in that realm. So I went from being a solopreneur to being a co-founder and the CEO of a boutique executive coaching firm. But it's always been kind of on that path. Initially, I guess I should say, really started out in the area of facilitation with a niche in strategy development. And somewhere around 2003, I noticed that companies were spending a lot of money bringing people together to develop business strategies so their firms were, quote, nimble and agile, but they really weren't paying attention to whether the thinking of their people was nimble and agile. And that's what got me interested in the coaching discipline, which is really a very separate discipline from consulting or facilitating. So added that certification, and then 6 years later went back for a master's certification, and then that same year went to the University of Pennsylvania for a master's in applied positive psychology, which is really a brand new field, studying the science of what allows human beings to flourish.
Wow.
And that's where p.Link Coaching Center for Excellence came from.
Wow. And there's so much to be said for this, because I talked to someone earlier interview where we focus on customer service and more so internal customer service, which many businesses fail to pay attention to, which is, you can pay attention to your outer core customers who buy your product, but how about the people working on getting your product and services into people's hand and life? They've got to be really thinking, as you say, nimble and agile, and really, really psyched to get up in the morning and be part of your organization.
Yeah, and frankly, Christine, I would say it might go even bigger than that. I was actually reading a 2015 report put out by a group in the UK called Red Letter Days for Business, and in 2015, they noted that less than 50% of their workforce was feeling positive about their jobs.
Whoa.
And so I wondered, like with this, all the turn of events of recently with the Brexit, like we been paying attention to how, whether or not people feel engaged with their work, how that makes them think about their life and their government, and whether their government is doing for them what they want to be doing.
Wow. And
I mean,
this, yeah.
look at what happened as a result of people feeling like they didn't have the life they wanted.
And really being empowered to make a choice. Really, the whole Brexit thing is a very complicated thing with finances and the global banking, central banks running things and such. So, but when I talk to people about it, they're really, a majority of folks, either the ones who are able to vote, because we've had quite a few people on from the UK, or people here in the United States are pretty not really clued up on what's going on around them, but really also feeling disempowered. That, do I really even have a voice? Does it matter that I know? And I think that translates to their work.
Yes. Well, 100%. I mean, if you're looking at any of the data that's coming out, that it's like, if in fact you're engaged, which means that you're experiencing a sense of meaning and purpose and that you can make a difference in that work environment, then it changes the way in which you're showing up. It changes the way in which you're seeing the world.
And this is interesting you bring that up, because it doesn't just affect you going to your day-to-day job, whether it be your own business or as an employee. It affects your entire life. And it's interesting because I work as a consultant. So I come in and I've been asked to talk to employees, and they will try to put their best foot forward because they know they're being gauged and such. And so they'll say all the right things. But when I see them on the floor at work, I see that often they are not happy. I see them at the water cooler talking gab about not liking their bosses or not liking the organization, and it goes deeper than what's coming out of their mouth. And I think a good portion of that, which I'm garnering, is that they just feel disempowered, and really that I'm just a number. I'm here. They hired me to do the job, but really I'm not that important. They can get rid of me tomorrow.
I think, Christina, you're probably right on track, and there's any number of thoughts that can go through in that mind, you know, when they're showing up in that way. I think one of the big distinctions that we talk about at p.Link is that it's the difference between giving that away, right? I mean, are you going to own or orphan your work story? And this whole question of work-life balance is a question of meaning, not minutes. There are not enough minutes in the day to accomplish everything that you want to do that adds to your life if your work, in fact, doesn't also do that.
Wow.
So
Go
ahead.
I was going to say, for anyone listening in, whether they have their own business or they're working as an employee, how do they begin to decipher, am I living the best life I could, and is this job, career, or calling really meshing with my greater essence?
Right. So I think that the distinction you make right there, this whole idea of job, career, and calling is kind of the first step to assessment. Okay. We think of it as getting back into the driver's seat, right? You are going to go self-author your work life. You're going to take that back as opposed to be a passive recipient of something happening to you. And the first thing you're going to do is kind of ask yourself the question, am I experiencing my work life as a job or as a career or as a calling? So the distinctions there are that on the one end you have a job, which is really where you are thinking about the source of the money you're making in that as enabling the other parts of your life. So the meaning of work is only defined through what it contributes to the other things you're doing, right? This is the version where you're just showing up, punching the clock so that you can do the things you love and enjoy outside of those hours. The far right side of the continuum, if you will, the calling, is where work is an end of itself, that the things you're doing during those work hours, you're really feeling contribute to a greater sense of good, however you define that, and that you're experiencing meaning and purpose in the day-to-day work hours. And then career is kind of in the middle. It's really like this, when you're doing your work, but it's really about advancement, prestige, and status. And that middle group, you know, they're probably more likely to make some of the sacrifices that people that are calling it a job or experiencing as a job wouldn't, but not so much as the people who are in the calling orientation, which is really where you see them being drawn to the work they're doing. It's really like a beckoning of the soul because it's deeply connected to the interests.
Wow, I love that you went here and deciphered those three different spaces. I know for me, when I first got started in the workforce, I worked in a copy capacity. I did copies in a law firm, first at a shop and then a law firm. And I remember thinking I should get a t-shirt that said, I live for 5 p.m. and after to go dance, because I was obsessed with dance. So what I did every waking moment that I was not at that copy center doing a job, quote unquote, was living to go dance. And so I lived for 5 to go dance. And then interestingly, I had this ideal in my head that what you do when you want to be successful, quote unquote, is that you advance in a career, you get a VIP job, you become a manager, whatever that is. And so for years, I was working up the corporate ladder, as it were, and I thought that would bring me a great sense of fulfillment and happiness, and it didn't, until I started to change my perspective to thinking about how am I serving the world in a bigger way with my gifts and talents. And that's what you're talking about when you say calling. Right?
Yes, you're a perfect case study. And in fact, you are. I mean, and in fact, one of the most interesting things about the data is that people fall roughly into a third in terms of that job, career, and calling. It's irrespective of their level in the organization. So even if you're looking at C-suite, you're still going to find about a third of those people who still think of that as a job.
Yeah.
So it doesn't follow the path, right? It doesn't follow the path that you get that senior level and all of a sudden you feel deeply engaged. But more the way you went at it, which is to sort of really think about how are my passions, my interests, my values, my strengths serving the world. And I would probably go so far as to bet that savvy is really an expression of that for you in the world.
You betcha. It's the ultimate expression. But it took me getting uncomfortable and getting away from what does career mean to me, what does success mean to me, and realizing that I was allowing the outer culture and what I grew up to be told success was to reflect what I was gaining or garnering towards success. It was really not my own definition. It was what I was told, that once you reach that state, then you'll be happy. Once you reach a managerial, vice president, whatever it might be, position, then you'll be happy. And I realized for me it was not the case.
Yeah, well, I think that you just pegged, one of our biggest urban myths, right? It is, and it's not until you realize that you're living your life by shoulds as opposed to really looking internally and saying, what am I actually drawn to? And where do I find that expression of my strengths? And one of the things that we have found at p.Link with all of our clients that's fascinating to me is that when you're operating from your strengths, which we differentiate from a skill, right? So a strength is really when you have a natural talent combined with a set of skills and you've practiced over time to hone them. A skill is when you've just really taught yourself how to do something, whether you're actually naturally good at it or not. So when you're operating from a strengths base, you are drawn to it, almost like a dog chasing a ball, like, the moth to the flame. It's this because there's intrinsic enjoyment out of expressing that strength in the world. And yet, because it feels so enjoyable and it's so easy for us, we tend to give it away for free or charge the least for it.
Oh, wow. You hit on something very, very important there. And I mean, even if you are an employee and not a business owner, what I had in my life that came into my life was a wonderful boss that helped me start seeing, are you on a path of living other people's shoulds, or are you on a path to really garnering and using your greatest gifts and talents? And he pushed me to the edge to use my gifts and talents in the world, and I'm forever grateful to him. But that, if you are, say, a boss in a C-level position, you have the power to make your calling, if you so choose, to really inspire and motivate your staff to really use their greatest gifts and talents and use their gifts and talents as the resource that helps the company grow.
I love that. That is one of the things that we talk to our leader clients about. This art of followership really says, you want to provide opportunities for your employees to stretch and grow and develop, because that's intrinsic in human beings. They want that. You can see that in tiny children, and you can see that in adults. And then be the source of hope and inspiration for that to happen, right? So you kind of create the space, and then you support with that hope and inspiration, much like you've described your own experience.
Yeah. And for the basis of the ones listening in right today who are business owners, what I found often from a lot of business owners over the past 4.5 years that we spoke to, often they do the same thing that employees do. They should have. They start a business based on what they think would be successful, or what they feel or been told they should do, more so than what is their greatest heart and longing telling them that this is just what I can't wait to get out of bed and do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And I think it's important to remember that employers are the same. They're people that have either started a business or ascended up the leadership ladder. And they're people who may or may not have looked at this in the same way that we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
There's two parts to this. I think there's the one part that has to do with, like worldview, and checking in with, am I pursuing the path that I want for myself, or am I pursuing a path that's been defined by some other person or group? And then, there's the second part of it, which is really the pragmatic path. Like, all right, so once you recognize that you want to make a shift, either as the business owner or as the employee, what are some of the things you can do?
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings me to, all right, say you're right now in either a business owner position or an employee situation where I dread getting up. It's Monday again. I don't want to get started. Where do they even begin to start thinking and changing the way they are in life so that they can start to transform to the life they want to be in?
Yeah, so let's talk first from the employee perspective, because the employer has a different set of options. So from the employee perspective, so the said employee has woken up on that morning and realized that they are really not where they want to be, and they want to make a change. So in order to move towards a more meaningful work life, you really are kind of guiding principles, know thyself. And that sounds, big and grand, but it's actually can break down to be kind of simple. So if you take 3 circles and you overlap them, and so one circle is your values. And the values are those principles that you would go to the ground fighting for. There are those core character traits that you admire in others and hold yourself accountable. Things like honesty, integrity, fairness, teamwork, those kinds of things are how we think about values. The second circle is strengths. These are your naturally occurring ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Those things that you could do with your hands tied behind your back, those things that you notice when you invest yourself in, you actually feel filled up instead of drained. And that can be really different for all kinds of different people. Like, so one person might say, wow, I want to go work a room and I want to play a game when I walk in that room and see if I can collect 200 business cards. And another person might say, that's my dread nightmare. I'll find one person I can talk to in the corner and, have a great conversation and then hope for it to be over.
Yeah.
One person can get lost in a spreadsheet and another person can push that to the very last thing because they hate it. So, discover what your strengths are. And you can do that by asking yourself simple questions like some of the ones I've just laid out, or you can use assessments. There are 2 really good assessments, one for each of those. So the values one is the VIA, or the Values in Action. It's a free one used worldwide. You can just literally search on VIA and find it. And then the Gallup Strength-Based Leadership is the one we use for strengths, which is a moderately priced assessment. And again, you can find that online. Those are your 2 circles. If you really are clear then on what that overlap is between your values and your strengths, right? Because utilizing your strengths in an environment that's not aligned with your values is going to be like a slow corruption of the soul. It's like, why am I investing the best of myself in something I don't believe in, or with people who don't align with my values? And then alternatively, being strongly aligned with your values, but not investing your strengths, working from a skill-based level is going to feel like a lot of effort. A lot of effort. And it's also accompanied oftentimes by the imposter syndrome.
Interesting.
Right? Because you're just operating in your skills and you're thinking, oh, how long until they discover this? So you're the employee. You want to really know, what are those values that are like your diehards, the ones that, you're just not willing to compromise and that you're tired of living without? Because a lot of people feel like you can't have those values at work. And I think, and p.Link thinks, that's exactly the opposite. You find a work environment that is aligned with those values, and then know your strengths well enough that you can articulate them and share them with other people in such a way that you can ask for and get the opportunities that you want, because they align, and you're going to be able to perform them better than somebody who's doing it from a skill-based perspective.
Those are really wonderful points.
If people are experiencing a sense of meaning and purpose in their work hours, they're going to be more engaged. And if they're more engaged, you're going to get more investment of their discretionary effort. And you want that, because that's where creativity comes from. That's where courage comes from. That is not malicious compliance. That is like, I am leaning in because we're all on this team together. We're doing this together. But as the employer, you really want to, if you're the boss, you want to be thinking about, how do I manage to outcome and not minutes? How do I give my employees the flexibility for using work hours to do personal things? Meaning, have a lunch, pick up the phone and call somebody, drop onto social media. The data basically supports that when people have the flexibility and autonomy to do that, even up to 2 hours a day, that they are actually more productive and more effective.
Wow. That is such a wonderful, wonderful point that you hit on, Gretchen. Many, many years ago, I was in a managerial role where I was asked to do performance reports on all of the employees. And there was one employee which I had expected, once I finished my report, was going to be horrible, because I saw she was doing that. Discretionary time, taking longer lunch breaks, coming in late sometimes, playing around on social media, making some personal calls. But I thought she was just too lax in the job. And I thought, well, her performance is going to reflect that for sure. Actually, she was the highest performer in that group. Yeah. And I was blown away. I was like, how is that possible? But because she was able to bring her best self to the table because it was flexible and that she could be herself.
Yeah, and the reality is those things that we're doing, quote unquote, during our personal time are filling our reservoirs, right? They are filling up our energy in other ways. They're contributing to the sense of a full life. They're bringing positive relationships in. They're filling us with either good humor or buoying us up during difficult times. And in the absence of that, we suffer.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really interesting is I think that it would allow her to really just get back a little bit of renewed energy. I had heard from one expert that came on a couple years on our show that it's important to realize where are your greatest strengths when you're working up to the best flow. And sometimes for some people that might be only working in 40-minute capacities. You work for 40 minutes, take a 20-minute break, or whatever it might be for a particular person. And she says, for me, it's work an hour and take a 15-minute break. And I work most efficiently that way. And it depends on each individual person, as you say, really understanding yourself and what works best for you.
Right. So cadence, right? So you could be a sprinter, you could be a marathon, and also time of day. I mean, I think this is one of the things that we're shifting. And if I could have any wish I wanted, it would be to speed this up, right? Like, so during the agrarian age, we were restricted by daylight hours. And then during the manufacturing age, we were restricted by the factory hours, clock in, clock out. And now in this digital and information age, we don't have those restrictions anymore. So why not let go of the belief that it has to be 9 to 5? Why not let your morning producers work in the morning and let your evening producers work in the evenings? Because people's high productivity time in the day is different. Yeah. Why not allow for that flexibility in the workday so that blends together, and there's not like, okay, I'm going to go into this cubicle from 9 to 5 and I'm going to have no outside connection until then, and I'm going to suffer, and then I'm going to do my best work, and then I'm going to come out and enjoy the rest of my life. And oh, by the way, I'm hoping that I can work from 20 to 65 and make enough money to enjoy my life and then retire and support myself for another 45, 50, 60 years. Like it's just not happening. So we can shift now and say we can let go of the belief that sort of bottoms in seats is the measure of success.
Good. Very good point. I mean, as a business owner here, what I've noticed about myself is when I started my business, I treated it just like when I was working as an employee at first. I would wake up at 9 and start my day and say I can't finish until at least 5. My creative juices start flowing about 7 p.m. onward. That's when I have my greatest thoughts and visions and images come in, and just the greatest ideas. So after about a year and a half, when I realized this, fitting myself into a 9 to 5 corporate way of working wasn't working for me, I started to work later hours, get up later, but really start to work when my juices were most flowing, and when they weren't, stop working. And it's, of course, been much more effective for me.
Yeah. And so then, Christine, if I were just to ask you, here's sort of some of the things that research contributes or attributes to what you've just described in terms of being engaged. So do you feel like living it that way, were you able to be more productive?
Oh, tons more. And it showed in the results we had in our business, and going forward. We got, much more feedback, positive feedback from clients, much more sales, and much more referral clients when we're living in our zone, or when I'm living in my zone as well. Yeah.
So then you're talking about productivity and effectiveness. And then what about if you just reflect on sort of your general state of happiness or sense of well-being?
Absolutely, because now when I fit it into, I don't have to do business hours, because I know, coming from an employee for 20 years, it's the idea that, everything's 9 to 5, everything must be 9 to 5. When I lightened up on that, I found that not only was I more creative when I worked the hours that were best for me, then I could enjoy the times, like say I go flying with my partner. Now we could get up in the morning and go fly and build my juices that way, doing something that gives me great joy.
Right. So I think we're talking a lot about flexibility, which is really important. And there's a lot of it when you're self-employed. And there is a lot of it when can be a lot of it when you're a small business owner. A little bit less so for a while anyway, while we're in this transition phase in some of the more corporate structured. But that doesn't mean that you can't self-author your work life in those environments. And so what that would look like in those kinds of environments would, being really clear, if you have the option to ask for flexible work arrangements, what you want to ask for, right? So don't work for later evening hours if you know your most productive time is in the morning. Ask for what works best for you and where you are in your phase of life. And then within the work you are doing, take a look at the tasks that are within your body of work and the relationships that you're spending regular time with, and start to look at those as flexible. So going back to where we started, which of the tasks that are you doing that are most clearly leveraging your strengths? And you can do that either through the assessment, or you can just ask yourself, how do I feel when I'm done with that task? Am I feeling energized and filled up, or am I feeling really tapped out? Do I dread that task? Do I resist it? These are all clues. So that you start to kind of you could make a list even of those tasks and sort them on a scale, so that you've got the ones that draw you the most and the ones that you resist the most. And then you start to look for ways to give away those ones that fall at the lower end of the scale, and really keep and expand the ones that align strongly with your strengths.
That is so important and great. I think more and more businesses and business owners are starting to realize that if they work from a perspective of results, and more so than, as you mentioned in the beginning, time, that you get much better results with your effectiveness with your employees. And if you come to the workforce and realize, here's my greatest gifts and talents, working maybe in the evenings, and I start juicing up, say, 3 p.m. onward, and you can bring and to your superiors and say, here, I can prove to you at 3 p.m. on to, say, 8 p.m., I'm kicking butt, I'm amazing, and you can bring those results to your management, that gives you some leverage to work with and say, okay, we want to, change your hours and give you that flexibility because we see the results that you're going to give us or present to us.
Yeah, and I think you could even, we call it a safe to fail experiment. So you could even ask your immediate supervisor to do a 40, 60, or 90-day pilot with you to experiment with this, and then agree ahead of time on what would be representative of value. So that you know what you're aiming for and they know what you're aiming for. And then also just embrace the fact that this is new. We're basically really trying to completely change the norms of what a work structure allows for. And it rattles, if you will, the normal way of doing things, whether that's how a phone is answered or how a performance appraisal is done. And so we need to create these safe-to-fail pilots where companies, small, medium, and large, can experiment with new ways of doing things.
So important. Well, this has been fantastic having you share this great wisdom and talent today with all of our listeners, whether they be employees listening or business owners. But I don't want us to leave without you letting everyone know where they can find out more about you and more about p.Link Coaching Center. Let them know about that.
I'm happy to do that. So our website is www.p.linkcoachingcenter.com. So P-L-I-N-K coachingcenter.com. And there's lots of great stuff on there, some fun videos, and there's a library of free resources. So I would really encourage your listeners to drop in there, tap into that library. There's PDFs you can download. There will be a special one customized for savvy listeners that's specific to today's interview. And these are shareables. So you can download them, you can use them to share what you've learned, you can use them to host your own conversation in your workplace around meaning and around self-authoring work life, and just keep coming back for more because we're always updating it.
You betcha. Well, that's awesome. Gretchen, I want to thank you again for coming to share all your gifts and wisdom and talents today on Savvy Business Radio.
Thank you very much, Christine. It's been really great for us.
Here's our interview with Dana A. Oliver, author of Mandra Design. Hi, Dana. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. How are you?
I'm doing great, Christina. First, let me say it's an honor, and a privilege to be part of your show and to be a guest on Savvy Central Radio. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for coming on out today because you've done tremendous work over the years helping Medtronic, a wonderful medical surgical company, grow from $100 million to $2 billion annual revenue in just 14 years. That is astronomical, amazing. So you're going to share your wonderful wisdom today along with a lot of the concepts that you share in your wonderful new book called Mandra Design. So before we get started, share a little bit about your background and how you came to writing your book.
Sure. Thanks for the question, Christina. So I guess for me, I'm one of those kind of great American success stories at some level. I grew up from a military family. Neither of my parents attended college. So for me, it meant that I had to, slug it myself. So I went 10 years nights and paid for my own tuition. So it certainly teaches you perseverance and grit. I've been in medical devices for 30 years. And to your point, I've got 25 patents. I've written 2 books, and I helped grow Medtronic Surgical Technologies from $100 million to $2 billion. And Medtronic is the world's largest medical technology company with revenues of $28 billion.
Whoa, that is phenomenal. And you're the main guy that helped them get there to the phenomenal success they're now enjoying. But you share in your book a little bit about how that's possible, and you share 14 mantras that have really helped build on leadership, strong leadership, and innovation. Explain for our audience a little bit about what exactly do you mean by innovation and what exactly encompasses an awesome leader?
Sure. I think great questions, Christina. So certain for me, innovation at the end of the day, let's first think about ideation. And ideation is nothing more than coming up with ideas. Innovation is the distillation of practice of those ideas, into commercial products. So my focus, at the end of the day, I have 4 tenets that I prescribe to business and to innovation, and that's, I like to see businesses invest no less than 10% of as a percentage of their revenues back into organic innovation, into research and development. That you need to focus on your strategically core platforms and only a few programs at any one given time. You need to develop your products through your customers' eyes. And then you need to hire great people and manage them with emotional intelligence.
So what I like, and I just picked up from you there, is that you're telling people to really downsize on the products they offer to start with and make sure that the products are optimum in what they deliver, and that they're really feeding into what customers really want and need. And then, of course, making it about the customers and about your internal customer service, which is your employees, correct?
You absolutely picked up on that, and that's a great find, Christina. And I think, to your point, when if people are a little older, they might look at the big businesses like General Electric, and at that time, Jack Welch, perhaps the most famous CEO of all time. It was all about, I'm going to create this conglomerate. But I think after the Jack era, what you found is you found companies like Starbucks or Victoria's Secrets. And what they did is they said, hey, we're going to create a narrower space. We're going to focus on our customers, and we're going to focus on their ecosystems. So for me, I am, part of my success has been, I have two mantras around this. One is learn your customer's world, and two, innovation begins with an I, and not the letter I, but the eyeball. And what that means is, you need to see and experience what your customers are doing firsthand.
So explain for me, what is a customer's ecosystem? What does that mean?
Sure. So if you think about an ecosystem, I think, perhaps some of the best people, let's look at Walt Disney. So if you go to Disney, it's not just about a theme park, but it's about the entire experience. So when you walk into Disney, you see people with a smile. You don't see people with facial hair. You see people with brightly colored clothes. The park is wonderfully lit up. It's safe. It's friendly. You can stay almost 24 hours a day. So that's what I mean about an ecosystem. Is it's more than I use an example in the book, right? And this is a great way to think of it. Is that imagine if you went to a restaurant and irrespective if you're vegetarian or not, but you got a fillet and the fillet was beautiful. But then if you looked at the rest of the experience, let's say it was raining out and you got wet, now you're cold and damp, and your reservation got missed. You got, to rush you in, now they've put you in a little corner of the restaurant. It's really loud and it's near where the chefs are working. So all of a sudden, is that fillet great? The answer is no, even though the chef might have done a wonderful job. So people need to think out and beyond just the product or just the service. They need to think of the ecosystem. And when you do that, that's how you get to breakthrough products.
Wow. This is phenomenal that we're going here, because I've had that experience in a restaurant. One in particular in my near neighborhood has wonderful food, but the customer service is super lacking. And they kind of feel when you get in there, get out. I want a new customer in that seat so I can make more money. Does not make you want to go back. As pretty as the place might look, as yummy as the food might be, I don't want to go there. And they're probably, go on.
I'm sorry, and what you're saying is that's a perfect example of what I'm referring to. You're describing it, right?
Exactly. And they're probably wondering, why are we not making the money we should be? Why are we not having every seat in here filled? And there's another diner up the block that has a line out the door every single day. They're stressed out of their mind. They can't get enough, how should you say it, people in the door, because there's just so many people out there. And I think it's the customer service, and it's really optimum there. Now, what's interesting is most of the people listening in here are service-based entrepreneurs. So there'll be coaches, consultants, sales reps, authors. And what I've noticed from this bunch, because I'm also a service provider as well, I provide wonderful interviews and such and events. But when I've gone to networking events, I see that the service providers, these coaches and consultants and otherwise, really more stress on the product, this wonderful event I'm putting together, this workshop. And they're not thinking about what is the full experience I can provide for my client that would just blow them out of the park and really be beneficial for them. And what's interesting, Dana, is there's one gal I met last year who put on a small workshop, and I didn't think it was super fabulous, but within 6 months, she had people
Yeah.
lined up at the door and waiting list. And what I noticed, this is the ecosystem you're talking about here, is the thing I realized that she provided is not just a workshop, she provided a space, because most of the people that came were women, a space where women felt nurtured the moment they walked in. Like when you walk in, there's candles lining your path all the way to your chair. The chairs are magnificently put together. It's just an experience. You want to come there, you feel taken care of, you feel nurtured, and that's, I think, what you're talking about, that she's created an actual experience from beginning to end that people can't wait to be a part of.
Right. I mean, so if you think about Starbucks, for example, why do people pay $5 or $6 for a latte? Is it because the latte is that good? Well, I mean, obviously Starbucks has some pretty respectable coffee, but they do it because they can go in and they can hang out. It's the ambiance. They go in, they're comfortable, they're not being rushed. They can, work on their computer, they can do some work, they can chat with a friend. They can just chill. It's a home away from home is part of the Starbucks experience, and that's what makes it great. And, I write about, one of the things and one of the mantras I use in my book is I tell people to become the product. And for me, in medical devices, when you think about that, but it's applicable to outside med devices, is that, it's the packaging. I mean, how many people have experienced that they have tamper-proof packaging? And it's just, you need scissors or even something worse to get into a package. The instructions are terrible. I mean, how good is the experience with the product if you can't get it even out of the package?
Wow. You right there hit on something that made me laugh. I saw a video of this marketer who had asked everyone, they were having problems at this company. I think they were selling condoms, and they couldn't understand why their sales were not higher. And he said, okay, everyone in the audience, I want you to take out a condom and open it up. And most of the people in the audience could not, within a minute, get their package. They were still struggling.
Oh, my Lord.
And he said, well, see, that is why your sales are dropping, because if someone's having a wonderful, sexy night and they're trying to get their the package open and they can't, well, then they're not going to buy your product. So
That's too funny. That's great, though. I mean, once again, that's a classic example, and unfortunately, just too many business leaders, don't think, they don't leave their office. They might have a killer or breakthrough idea, but you need to get, and that's why I prescribe, you need to visit. You need to get in the ecosystem. For me, one of the great successes that helped me, grow surgical technologies was that we had a simulated surgical lab. So we would invite doctors in, and we had a full suite. We had all the tools that they needed. We had a cadaver setting, so that if we were developing a product, we'd watch them. I'd bring guys in. We'd have videotape going. I'd have multiple people watching, and then we'd sit there and quietly observe. And it's really interesting to me because you can talk to a customer. You can go to as many focus groups as you want, but what you find is what people say is not always what they do.
Wow.
And when you begin to see them in a simulated environment using your product, then you begin to go, oh, my Lord. So all the things that they articulate are what they call user needs, and those are great. It's the things that are unarticulated. And when you begin to see somebody in their ecosystem, and if you can, dial in the pain points, so if you see a redundant motion or something that's highly inefficient, they may have got used to it, so they don't care about it no more. But the reality is it's a problem. And if you can solve that problem, that's how you discover an unmet need, and then you devolve it. And to your point, a lot of these service people, I'll make one comment, Christina, here, is that, out of every 10 people, you'll find in the country, only one person will speak up if they don't like something. And they do it, because a lot of people don't like conflict. And so even though they might have a bad experience, they'll walk out the door. But so imagine yourself as a small business owner. And, if you're doing something wrong, only 1 out of 10 people, and you might be thinking, "Oh, geez, this is a fluke. No one's talking to me." Boy, you can't look at it in that fashion.
You hit on something really, really important there, because I've put out my own survey and said, hey, people, how do you feel? Are we serving your needs? But being that I myself don't even like to tell people if things aren't going well, it feels uncomfortable and you don't want to hurt people's feelings. How do you get at the point where you get, are they happy, are they not happy? Now, you mentioned really working them into an ecosystem where they get to simulate or be merged with your product, where you get to see them at that. How would that work for, say, a service provider, say a consultant or a coach? How would they get to see their customers kind of ingrained into their product before they buy it.
Yeah. So I mean, so it depends on what your product is, though. You know, example, like if you think about the car industry or even the computer industry, they'll give people beta software, and then they'll watch them use that beta software and quietly observe, hey, what commands, what's a natural keystroke, you know, what's, you know, a natural progression, what are they focused on?
Mm-hmm.
And it's that type of work when you just quietly watch people and observe and then ask them questions.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you can do that with many things. You know, I mean, the car industry, right? They like to take people for rides. They'll watch them in the back seat, and how do they, you know, that's how the cup holder became so damn popular in cars, which is amazing to me. And you have people that ultimately that's the decision maker in their car. Is it a good cup holder, or is it a nice place to hold my sunglasses? It's funny how people work and think, but boy, you know, no matter what your product is, you have to. It's you know, if you bought a mattress lately, what do they want you to do? Is they want you to lay on it.
Yeah.
You know, ideally, they even have sleep centers where, you know what I mean. Is this comfortable? Is this satisfy your need? So, you know, for me, what I look for is, you know, when I'm doing product development, you know, in the simulated environment, we collect feedback, and we can iterate the product, and this goes on and on. And to your point, I know that I'm in a good place when finally we've evolved the product to a point where I hear consecutively 12 to 20 customers tell me, hey, Dana, this is great. I'm liking this. And so that's what I look for, is a consistent theme from my customers. But if you're hearing, you know, scattered data, well, it's telling you that you're missing something. And that would be the advice I would tell your customers is, and the other thing too, you got to be careful with what I call your key opinion leaders. And there's always individuals in any profession that are at the top of their that profession. Well, and they can give you a false sense of what's right and what's wrong. You know, I prescribe to showing it to friends, foes, and average Joes. So you got to get a cross section of people if you want to hear what's true, right?
Yeah, and this is really interesting that what I caught from you there is not only, see, I guess for coaches, because that's a good majority of people who listen in, if they were to have a event or VIP day that would maybe be a smaller event. I went to a spiritual retreat about 6 years ago where they offered a smaller version of the 4-day intensive within a one Saturday. So you could experience it for 2 hours, just a small portion of what you would get for the entire 4 days. And it would be for free. So then they get to see and experience how people like, what they didn't like, and this gives you a feedback. What are they really looking for in a spiritual retreat or in a coaching workshop? What do they most need? As you said, your pain points of your customer. Now, a very important thing you mentioned was asking questions when they're there. Like at the spiritual retreat, they're coming around and saying, what did you feel after this? What did you gain from this? What didn't you gain? So really asking the question, I think that might be missing a lot from a good portion of business, is really asking the questions of their clients.
You know what's interesting to me, and this is just a sidebar, you know, so you have a 4-day spiritual retreat. Now you're going to try to compress it into 1 day. I would think a problem with this is that most people, if you want to get a spiritual kind of an enlightenment, is you need quiet and reflective time. You know, so if you think of people that study Buddha or meditate, it's kind of like REM sleep. You can't just say, okay, here we go, we got 30 minutes, get in this mattress, close your eyes, and I need to see your eyes, you know. Well, you know, so I mean, really, are they setting themselves up for failure? Because now all of a sudden they're trying to ask questions to their audience, but they're, you know, if someone really wants to, and I think a retreat is that you have to give them time to find themselves and to think and to clear their head of the clutter. And you can't do that if you're on a time frame.
That's true. Wow. So yeah. So I guess that process wouldn't. I mean, for me, I tried the weekend Saturday thing, and I was intrigued. So I said, okay, I'll do the 4-day thing. But actually, when I got there for the 4-day event, it was very funny. I've mentioned this on my show before. They handed me about 10-page. You know, document to fill out that I won't sue them, what have, you know, it kind of, and I was like, whoa, what are we going to do the next 4 days? I'm starting to rethink this.
You're absolutely right, Christina. I mean, it's that kind of stuff. And again, that's part of the whole experience, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly, though, what's interesting, you might have had a good time at the retreat, but boy, what's interesting is that one experience is what you're talking about.
Yeah, because it makes you think twice. Like, I have to sign my life away. I won't sue you if I die. Why would I die in a spiritual retreat?
Right, right. And that's part of the ecosystem that I'm talking to and becoming the product. And, it's like hospitals, right? You get those darn little gurneys, and the little jammies and jumpsuits that they put you in, and you're half naked.
Yeah.
I mean, so no matter how great you want you might have the best surgeons in the world, but it doesn't mean you're going to have a good experience.
Yeah.
And that's how small customers need to think. They need to observe the entire experience. Everything from our example. If you go up to a counter, and all of a sudden, and this is one of my pet peeves, is that I won't take the time to walk into a business because I don't like all the digital stuff. So I take the time to travel, whether I walk there or whether I take my car. I park my car, I get out, I go into the establishment. So let's say I'm going to order, a coffee or a tea or maybe a sub. Then the phone rings.
Yep.
And the staff, what do? They answer the phone. And I'm thinking, they're like, my God, really? I'm a real person. To me, that's just inappropriate.
Yeah.
Now, on the backside of that is that, part of one of the things that we did is that we hired enough service personnel so that the phone would never ring more than 3 times. Because what happens is people get angry and outraged if they can't get in communication with a real person. So again, it depends on what your service or what your product is, but you have to look at it from the entire experience if you really want to make it a really good product.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that you just mentioned something very important about you're a real life person. I'm here, I'm live, and you're paying attention to the phone and the electronics. And I find that happens, and I've gone into a video store and you take care of all the people on the phone, and I'm like, dude, I'm right here, line. But you're right, it's completely disrespectful. And on the other note, if you are a complete digital company, online company, have a way for a customer to call and talk to a live human being. It is my biggest pet peeve because, I've had coaches on, I don't want to be overloaded with so many phone calls. I just allow them to send a little form that goes to my little email. I'm like, I want to talk to a real life human being. Sometimes the way the copy is written, I don't quite understand how your product is going to fit into my life, my ecosystem, and how you're going to help me. And I want you to explain that to me in a phone call, not in this, digital form that I'm going to shoot off to you and hope you get back to me. And my personal experience is 9 times out of 10, I don't get a prompt response or sometimes even a response at all to those digital formats. So, yeah, a really, really good point, Dana.
Yeah. For me, it's all about, look, at the end of the day, if you want to have a great business, it's all about it starts and it ends with your customers. And when you begin to forget about your customer anywhere in between there, if you start to worry about your company or your portfolio, then all of a sudden you're missing the point, is that if you're not thinking about your customers every day, every night, then you have a problem. And to me, again, I'll keep repeating this, is that there's lots of people out there that do focus groups, or they hire consultants, and they do all kinds. That's the Internet of Things, right? You can, which is fantastic. It's wonderful, all the information you can get, but that's not the same as being in the same room, being in the same experience with your customers. And if you want to develop those, identify those unmet needs, people don't know what their unmet need is. They can't envision the future. So what you need to do is you need to see them and figure out what they're doing, and it's those pain points. If you can become so close to your customer base that, 1, you understand their articulated needs, but then 2, you begin to appreciate their unarticulated needs, that's where, unmet need begins to transform. Now, identification of an unmet need doesn't mean you have a breakthrough product. You still have to develop it thereafter, but that's where we talked about the ecosystem and, iterating, and it takes a long time to get to simple. I love, it's an expression I use a lot because, seamless doesn't happen overnight. Seamless only happens after iteration after iteration after iteration. It takes forever to get to seamless, but that's what's so beautiful when you get to there. It's like everyone goes, oh my God, this is so nice. This is great. Well, it takes a long time to get there.
They don't know why they love it. They just love it. And it's because they're meeting needs that they're not even aware that they have, that you've tapped into.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah, and this is really awesome that you mentioned this, because there's a book I read recently of a marketer, and he and his company have done something I thought was outrageous at first, which is they go and spend a week or a weekend with their customer in their house, seeing them use the product. They say, hey, is it okay? We want to come into your household. And they say, because why? It's their turf, and you get to see them on an everyday basis living with your product. And he said, we notate everything, even the things that seem inconsequential to the use of our product, because at the end of the day, that small data will give us massive ideas of what's working, what's not working, what do they need, what are the pain points, what are things they don't even know they need that now we know would be helpful to them.
Oh, you are absolutely, you're spot on.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. I mean, example, I mean, how many people did if they plug in their vacuum cleaner, how many people go over to the wall and unplug it? I do. But you know what? The average person just tugs on the cord from 10 feet away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, now what happens if you didn't take the time to address that and to ensure that your cord now is robust? Then you know what? You might have the best vacuum in the world, but now if your cord breaks down after 10 or 20 usages, you have a problem. The same thing with dishwashers, right? How many people pre-clean their dishwashers? Well, I do. I'm not. I try to minimize mine, but it's the same thing. A lot of people just let dry food in there and they put stuff in. Well, boy, that to a designer of a dishwasher, that's far different. It means you got to run the cycle maybe longer. The heating plates need to be a little hotter. So if you want to get that dirty food uncrusted off the plates. Yeah. But it's, to your point, it's the experiences when you spend time with your customers. You see all those things that they do that otherwise you wouldn't do.
Absolutely. And your book really touches on, we didn't get a big portion of our interview to really touch on it, but how important is innovation to a business success? Why is it so important?
To me, innovation is, so I talked about my foundational principles. The first one is to reinvest 10% of your company's revenues back into organic innovation. And what happens is when you continue to reinvest, I used to have an instructor that would say, Dana, nothing's ever written, it's rewritten. The same truth is for a product. So, think about the car industry. Imagine if Henry Ford and the Model T, they chose that there were never any improvements. Well, boy, there was air conditioning, and there was rack and pinion steering, and, there was airbags and seat belts, and products are no different. And so you have to continually innovate, and what that does is that now is the mechanism for your sales team to get back in front of your customers. I mean, so it's problematic for a sales team to maybe have one product and there's nothing new about it. It's like, yeah, I've talked to Christina before. I know what she's going to say. Oh my God, you want to give Christina something new to talk about. Yeah. So it jazzes up new products, jazz up your sales force. It shows that you're listening to your customers, because a lot of feedback and product improvement comes from recommendations from your customer base. So if you're a big old staunchy company that's not making the improvements, customers get turned off. They think, oh, they're not listening to me. But if you're a little company and a mobile mover and you're making iterations and tweaks, all of a sudden as a customer you're like, boy, I want to partner with these guys. If you're thinking about, the other companies that you might partner with as well, they're looking at you saying, my God, they're a real shaker and mover. I want to be a partner with them. I don't want to partner with something big and staunchy. So there's many, many reasons, as well as competition. Technology does not age well. And so it's easy to fall on your laurels and then get leapfrogged. If you're continuing to innovate, that's how you continue to drive growth. Because if you look at the adoption curve of sales, and I don't care what product it is, it's not perpetual. You have people that quickly adopt, you have the bigger majority that takes a little while, and then you have that last 5%. But you get a bell curve. So the key to growth is you have to ensure that you're either iterating or introducing new products during that growth phase if you want to continue to grow.
It's really keeping up the momentum of what you first started, and realizing that life is dynamic and customers' needs are dynamic, and to continually be up on that. What are your clients' now needs and unmet needs that you could really give them to the best of your ability with your product?
Oh, you're absolutely right. It's about momentum. In great businesses, it's that same thing, right? If you want to have lousy customer service, I mean, yeah, you might get one sale, but then you're not going to get that customer back. I mean, you want repeat sales. So the key is if you keep on innovating product, not only do you might satisfy and keep happy, those original customers, but then you can expand and keep that customer base moving and growing.
Absolutely. These are such wonderful points we're bringing home today, and this is great for whether you are a startup business just getting out of the gate and wondering, how do I get started? How do I meet my clients' needs? You're getting it right here from Dana. Medium-sized business to super large, all of these businesses can benefit from your wisdom and your wonderful new book, Mandra Designs. Share with people where they can get your book and find out more about you. Thanks,
Christina. I think the best place is to visit my website, www.mantra, M-A-N-T-R-A, leadership.com. That's one word, Mantra Leadership. And it's great because I post like interviews like this. I put all my interviews up online as well as magazines that I've been into. And people can link off, so if they're uncomfortable, it links you over to Amazon where you can buy the books. But this way people can get a sense of who I am.
Absolutely. And hopefully they've gotten a whole bunch of juicy content here and stuff they can start applying and using today in their business, which I know they can. And I want to thank you, Dana, for coming to share on Savvy Business Radio today. Thank you.